Every morning for 9 years, Ranata Odum woke up at 4:47 a.m., made coffee she didn't drink, packed 3 lunches, dropped 2 kids at school, took the bus to her hospital shift, worked 8 hours as a nurse's aide, came home, made dinner, helped with homework, and went to bed at 11. Her husband Gerald had not worked in 14 months. On the Family Feud stage on the afternoon of September 8, 2022, in front of 208 audience members and every camera on the floor, Gerald Odum turned to his wife of 11 years, pointed at her, and said into a live microphone, "She's the reason we're poor. She can't manage money, and she never could." Ranata Odum did not collapse. She did not cry. She went very still, the way a person goes still who has heard a version of that sentence so many times it has stopped requiring a response. Steve Harvey, standing 3 feet away, watched her face. He took 1 step toward Gerald Odum, and what happened in the next 4 minutes would be called the most important 4 minutes in Family Feud history by people who have watched every episode ever aired. It was a Thursday afternoon in Atlanta. The studio was warm, and the Odum family had come from Cleveland, Ohio. Gerald, Renata's sister Pam, Renata's brother-in-law Darnell, and Renata's mother, Miss Evelyn, who was 68 years old and sitting at the end of the contestant row holding a small purse in both hands like she was bracing for something. The other family, the Garcias from San Antonio, 5 cousins who came in matching red shirts and were clearly there to have the time of their lives, had already made Steve laugh twice before the game started. Gerald Odum had come in wearing sunglasses he kept on until a producer asked him to remove them. He removed them slowly. He looked at the lights the way people look at things they feel entitled to. He put his arm around Renata for the introduction. She smiled at the camera. Her smile was smaller than the situation asked for. The game began normally enough. The Odums were competitive. Renata was sharp on the buzzer, and Pam had 2 clean steals in the first round. Gerald buzzed in twice and missed both, and made a noise each time like the question was the problem. Ranata touched his arm once after the second miss. He moved his arm away. Nobody in that studio knew what Miss Evelyn had prayed about in the car on the way to the taping. Renata had been the financial backbone of the Odum household for the last 14 months. Gerald had left his warehouse job voluntarily. He said the management was disrespectful, and maybe it was. And maybe that was true, and had been looking since then in the way that generates a lot of conversations about looking without producing anything resembling a job. The bills were Renata's. The grocery runs were Renata's. The $1,400 a month in childcare was Renata's. Their son Marcus was 8. Their daughter Bree was 5. Bree had started asking why Daddy was always home, and Renata had told her Daddy was working on something special. She said it with the voice she used when she needed her children to believe something she didn't. She had applied to Family Feud because they needed the money. It was that simple. She had applied in March, and when they called in July, she had arranged everything. Time off from the hospital, Pam to watch the kids, her mother's bus ticket from Cleveland, without asking Gerald to arrange a single thing. Gerald had suggested they go. Gerald had also suggested that he should be the one to do the fast money round, because I'm better under pressure. Renata had agreed because she was tired of the argument that came when she didn't agree. And that wasn't even the part that broke the room. The feud round ended with the Odums up by a narrow margin. Fast money was called. Gerald sat in the chair first, the way he had insisted. He scored 91 points in his round, below average, but workable. He came back to the contestant area pleased with himself, telling Darnell it was basically already won. Renata took the chair for the second round. She needed 109 points. She got 108. 1 point short. 1 point from $20,000. Steve Harvey came to the center stage to announce the result. He was building toward the consolation. The "You played great," the way he always does, when Gerald Odum's voice cut through the studio. "I told you," he said it to Ranata. Not loudly. But the microphone was still hot, and the studio was quiet, and 208 people heard it. Every time. He shook his head. "She's the reason we can't have anything. She's the reason we're poor. She cannot handle pressure, and she cannot manage money, and I have been saying that for years." The studio fell completely silent. Ranata Odum did not move. Miss Evelyn, at the end of the row, closed her eyes. Steve Harvey stopped walking. He turned. He looked at Gerald Odum for a full 3 seconds without speaking, which is a very long time on a television stage. Then he walked, slowly and directly, to where Gerald was standing. He said, "What did you just say?" Gerald, who had not expected the question, who had expected the ambient noise of the studio to absorb what he'd said the way ambient noise usually does, started to repeat it. He got through 4 words. Steve held up his hand. "Stop." The room held its breath. "I need you to look at something with me." Steve did not raise his voice. He was very calm. He turned slightly, still looking at Gerald, and he addressed the audience and the cameras at the same time. This woman, Ranata, just did something impressive. She sat in that chair under lights and cameras in front of 200 people and came within 1 point of winning $20,000. 1 point. And the first thing said to her, not "You were incredible," not "I'm proud of you," not "We'll get it next time," was that she's the reason your family can't have anything. He paused. "I need you to think about what you just said in front of your children's grandmother, in front of your family, in front of everybody watching at home, because I am not going to stand here and let that go." Gerald opened his mouth. Steve said, very quietly, "I'm talking." The audience held. "I have a rule on this stage. You can lose your money. You can miss your answers. You can have a bad day. But you will not disrespect someone in front of me and walk away from it like it was nothing. Not on my stage. Not in my house." He looked at one of the stage managers. A single look, practiced, unambiguous. The stage manager nodded. Security moved to Gerald Odum's side. Steve said, "I'm going to ask you to step off the stage." Gerald looked at the security. He looked at Steve. He looked at Ranata. And something in Gerald Odum's face, something that had been arranged in a particular way for a very long time, shifted. He stepped back from the podium. He walked, without incident, to the side of the stage. He stood there. He did not leave. He stood with his arms at his sides and he watched. Steve walked to Ranata. She was still standing at the podium. Her hands were flat on the surface. She was looking straight ahead. Steve stood beside her, not in front of her, beside her, and he said quietly, "You okay?" She looked at him. She said, "I've been okay for a long time. I'm used to okay." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey stepped back. He pressed his handkerchief to his face. He had to turn away from the cameras for a moment. His shoulders moved. He turned back. He looked at Ranata and he said, "Let me tell you something. I stood on a stage for the first time in 1985, and every person I knew told me I was wasting my time. That I wasn't good enough. That I didn't have what it took. And I had a moment, I won't go deeper than that, where I almost believed them. Where I almost let what they said become the truth." He paused. "What I know now, after everything, is that the people who work the hardest are never the reason for anything that went wrong. They're the reason anything went right. The reason the lights are on. The reason the kids are fed. The reason the family is still standing. And they are the last ones to say so. He looked directly at Ranata. I see that in you. Everybody here sees that in you. Renata's hands came off the podium. She pressed them to her face. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the Garcia family across the stage, who had been standing very still for several minutes, the matching red shirts suddenly very quiet. Rosa Garcia, the eldest of the cousins, was already walking across the stage before Steve said anything. She walked to Ranata and put her arms around her. She didn't say anything. She just held on. Steve held up his hand. There was more. He pulled out his phone on the live stage. He dialed. He put it on speaker. He said, "This is Steve Harvey. I need to speak with Dr. Patricia Wren." A pause. "Tell her it's about the Family Feud initiative." "Yes," he turned to the audience. "I have been working with a legal aid organization in Atlanta, Family Forward Legal, for the last 2 years. They specialize in one thing, making sure that the people holding families together have access to the tools they need to protect themselves and their children." He came back to the phone. "Patricia, I have a woman named Ranata Odum on my stage. She has 2 children, Marcus, 8, Bree, 5. I want her to have a consultation. Full service. Tonight, whatever she needs." He looked at Ranata. "She'll call you in the morning." Ranata looked at the phone. She looked at Steve. She said, "I don't know what to say." Steve said, "You don't have to say anything. You've been doing enough talking with your actions for 9 years. Let somebody else talk for a minute." He wasn't finished. He turned to the audience one last time. He broke the 4th wall, the one he reserves for the moments that go beyond the game, beyond the studio, beyond the cameras. He said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home. If you are in a house where the person who does the most is told they are the reason for the least, I need you to hear this. That is not the truth. That has never been the truth. Your labor is not invisible, even when it is treated that way. Your sacrifice has a value that no one gets to subtract from, no matter how loudly they say it." He paused, and to every person watching who recognizes themselves in what happened today, who is the 4:47 a.m. person, the 3 lunches person, the I'm fine person, you are not the reason for anything that went wrong. You are the reason anyone made it through. The $20,000 prize was awarded to both families. The Garcia family applauded the announcement by putting their arms around each other and looking at Ranata until she saw them. Miss Evelyn stood up from her seat and said, "To no one in particular, and everyone at once, my baby has always been worth more than this." The episode aired 8 weeks later. The clip, from Gerald's words to Steve's single look at security to his walking to Ranata, ran 47 seconds in the version that spread first. It was viewed 95 million times in its first 4 days. The extended version, which included Steve's full remarks and the phone call, was viewed by an additional 180 million people within 3 weeks. The hashtag, #the447person, trended globally for 11 days. 3 months after the taping, Ranata Odum had completed her intake with Family Forward Legal. She had also received $34,000 in donations from a crowdfunding page that a stranger started the day after the clip aired. She had not authorized it, had not known about it, and cried for 20 minutes when her sister texted her the link. The donations were still coming in. A year after the episode, Ranata had completed her licensed practical nursing certification, the one she had deferred 3 years earlier, because there hadn't been time, hadn't been money, hadn't been anyone to watch the kids while she studied. She passed on the first attempt. She called her mother from the parking lot of the testing center. Miss Evelyn answered on the first ring. She said, "I know, baby, I already know." Today, Ranata Odum works as an LPN at a pediatric clinic in Cleveland. She starts at 7:00 a.m. She does not start at 4:47. She is home by 4:15. She has dinner with her children on a table she bought herself with her first full LPN paycheck. Marcus is 11. He plays basketball on Saturdays at a rec league where one of the coaches is a man named Darnell, his uncle, who drives him without being asked every single week. Bree is 8. She has decided she wants to be a doctor, a decision she announced at the dinner table on a Tuesday with the absolute certainty of someone who has never doubted herself. When Ranata asked why, Bree said, "Because doctors help people, and so do you." Ranata had to leave the table for a moment after that. She said she was getting more water. She stood in the kitchen and pressed her hands against the counter and breathed. Then she went back and sat down and said, "Then you'd be a very good doctor." Gerald Odum is not in the story anymore. Not because of anything dramatic that happened after the stage. What happened on the stage was not an ending, it was a beginning. The beginning of a longer and more honest conversation. But because some conversations, once they begin honestly, lead somewhere the people in them cannot follow together. That is not a tragedy. It is, sometimes, the correct conclusion. Pam, Renata's sister, drives Marcus to basketball on the Saturdays when Ranata works. Miss Evelyn calls every Sunday. She calls at the same time every week, and Ranata always answers, and they talk for as long as they need to. Miss Evelyn told Ranata, after everything had settled, that she had prayed specifically on the way to the studio that morning. She had prayed with her eyes closed in the back seat of the car, while Kevin drove, and the highway ran flat and early and quiet outside the window. She had her purse in her lap and her hands folded on top of it, and she prayed the way she had been praying for 68 years, plainly, specifically, without decoration. She had prayed for something to shift. Ranata asked her what exactly she had prayed for. Miss Evelyn said, "I prayed for the right person to be standing close enough to see what I've been seeing for years." She paused. She looked at her daughter. And he was. Steve Harvey was asked in a later interview what he would say now to the person he asked to step off the stage that day. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I would say the same thing I said then. I would say it every time. A stage or a kitchen or a bedroom or a boardroom, it doesn't matter. When someone is doing all the work and being told they're the problem, somebody has to say something. I just happen to have a microphone. Some people carry families on their backs and are told the family is not moving fast enough. Some people wake up before the sun for 9 years and are told they are the reason there is not enough sun. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the right person is standing close enough, with a microphone and enough history of his own to know exactly what he's looking at." Ranata Odum made 108 points in the fast money round. She missed by 1. She has said since then that she thinks about that number sometimes, not with regret, but with a kind of wonder. Because if she had made 109, the segment would have ended. The cameras would have moved. Gerald would not have said what he said. And everything that came after, the legal help, the certification, the clinic in Cleveland, Bree saying she wants to be a doctor, none of it happens. She missed by 1 point. And everything changed. If this story about the person who does the most and gets the least, and the moment someone finally said so out loud, moved you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their work is seen, even when it isn't acknowledged. Have you ever been the person holding everything together while being told you weren't doing enough? Share your story in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what it looks like when someone stands up for the people who are always standing up for everyone else.